I spent 3 years working the graveyard shift at a Sunoco off Route 9 in upstate New York. It was a miserable, soul-crushing job, but it paid the bills while I chipped away at online classes. The station sat on a desolate stretch of highway, miles from the nearest town, bordered on 3 sides by nothing but miles of dense, old-growth black pine trees. Between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m., the world outside that brightly lit glass canopy felt entirely dead. I was always hyper-aware of how visible I was to the dark woods, while I couldn't see past my own reflection in the glass. It was a rainy Tuesday in mid-November when the silence broke. The digital clock above the beverage coolers read 2:14 a.m. I was leaning against the counter, desperately nursing a stale cup of black coffee, when the chime above the entrance door let out a sharp, metallic ding. I hadn't heard a car pull up to the pumps, which was immediately strange. The rain was drumming heavily against the roof, but usually, the hum of an engine or the glare of headlights would signal a customer's arrival. Sometimes truck drivers parked on the dark shoulder of the highway and walked over, so I tried to rationalize it. I looked up from my phone, expecting a tired trucker in flannel. Instead, a young woman stepped inside. She wore a pale yellow sundress, completely inappropriate for a freezing November night. It was soaked through, clinging to her thin frame. She was entirely barefoot, her skin pale and goosebump covered, leaving wet, muddy prints on the freshly mopped linoleum as she walked. "Can I help you find something?" I asked, a tight knot of unease forming in my chest. She didn't answer. She kept her head down, her long, dark, wet hair draped completely over her face like a shroud. She walked with a strange, stiff gait straight toward the back of the store, stopping directly in front of the glass beverage coolers. She stood there, perfectly still, staring into the bright, glowing drinks. "Miss?" I called out, raising my voice. "Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone? Or use the phone?" Slowly, she began to turn around. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed loudly, casting harsh, flickering shadows across her face. My breath caught in my throat. Her skin was a sickening, translucent gray, almost blue around her collarbones, and her lips were dark purple from the freezing cold. But her eyes, they were wide open, completely vacant of any pupil or iris, just milky white. And stretched across her face was a massive, rigid, bloodless smile. It was pulled back so far, her cheeks looked like they were on the verge of tearing. She didn't walk toward me. She moved. Her body jerked violently to the side with a sickening, wet pop of her hip joint. She took a long, completely unnatural stride, her arms swinging limply like a broken marionette. Her head tilted to the side at a grotesque 90-degree angle, her neck bones crunching audibly in the quiet store. I bolted backward, slamming into the metal tobacco racks behind the register, knocking plastic displays to the floor. "Get the hell back!" I screamed, grabbing the heavy, solid metal Maglite flashlight from under the counter. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. The woman stopped exactly 10 feet from the cash register, standing in the middle aisle under the buzzing light. Then her blue lips parted. But the voice that came out of her throat didn't belong to a woman. "Can I help you find something?" My jaw went slack. It was my voice. The exact, identical pitch, the slight gravelly rasp of my throat, the flat, upstate New York accent, delivered with absolute, chilling, tape recorder precision. Before I could even process the horror, she spoke again. But this time, her voice instantly shifted into a deep, gravelly baritone. It was the voice of a truck driver who had stopped in hours earlier to buy cigarettes. Just 20 on pump 4, buddy. Keep the change." Then, her vocal cords began to rapidly cycle. It was like someone was violently spinning a radio dial in the dark, skipping through static and picking up fragments of old broadcasts. She screamed in a young child's high-pitched voice, "Mommy, it's dark." She laughed in an old woman's raspy cackle, "Have a blessed day." She whispered in a low, panicked, desperate tone, "Why won't the car start? Oh God, why won't it start?" There was no pause for breath. There was no overlap. Each voice was delivered consecutively, her jaw snapping open and shut with a hollow, wooden clack, clack, clack that sounded like two pieces of timber hitting each other. She was practicing. She was running through her collection of stolen voices, using the final, terrifying moments of the people she had taken in the dark. And then, she began to piece those fragments together to make a sentence of her own. "I hear you. In there. Help me. Please, open the door. It's so cold." The sheer, unnatural horror of hearing a jigsaw puzzle of human suffering spoken through a smiling, broken corpse broke something inside me. "Get out!" I shrieked, channeling all my terror into my arm, and threw the heavy Maglite flashlight with everything I had. The heavy metal cylinder flew through the air and struck her square in the left shoulder. There was a loud, wet crack as her collarbone shattered under the impact. Her shoulder slumped down, completely broken, but the woman didn't flinch. She didn't cry out in pain, because she didn't have a voice of her own to scream with. She just tilted her head even further, her neck popping, and took another disjointed, rapid step toward the counter. Just as I prepared to jump over the counter and run for the back exit, a pair of blindingly bright headlights swept across the front glass windows. An 18-wheeler was pulling up to the diesel pumps outside, its loud, rumbling engine shaking the entire convenience store. The bright glare of the truck's high beams flooded the interior, washing out the fluorescent lights. The moment the direct light hit her, the woman's manic smile vanished. She let out a wet, rattling, guttural hiss. She spun around with terrifying, inhuman speed, dropping onto all fours like a spider, her broken limbs snapping into place. She sprinted toward the back of the store, slammed her body through the employees' only door, and vanished into the pitch-black woods behind the station. The truck driver walked inside a minute later, shaking the rain off his jacket and grumbling about the weather, completely oblivious to the nightmare that had just unfolded. I didn't say a single word to him. My hands were shaking so violently I couldn't even process his transaction. I handed him his receipt, waited for him to walk back to his truck, and then locked the heavy glass entrance doors from the inside. I called my manager, told him there was an emergency, and quit on the spot. I left my keys on the counter and drove home in a trance. I moved out of the state a month later, taking a boring desk job in a crowded suburban city. I don't work nights anymore. But sometimes, when I'm driving long distances and have to pull over at a brightly lit gas station in the middle of nowhere, I won't get out of the car. I sit in the driver's seat, staring through the rain at the glass storefront, terrified that if I look closely enough at the beverage coolers, I'll see a pale yellow sundress, waiting for me to step inside so it can take my voice next. Double tap if your chest just tightened. Share this with someone who loves scary stories, and hit that follow button right now so you never miss another midnight nightmare.